We are going to start with Yanev Suissa from SineWave Ventures. Yanev has been here before. Attendees who come here or participants who come here regularly, you know that we always have or often have investor guests who provide context and overviews of what's happening in the industry, as well as sometimes mentor entrepreneurs at these sessions with me. So Yanev, welcome back. Great to see you again, and
It's
look forward
good
to
to see
chatting.
you too. Yeah, I'm excited.
All right, well, tell me what's been going on and how are you parsing what's happening around us?
You know, things are moving so much faster these days. You see, startups are growing faster. What is needed by businesses is changing faster. The tech is moving faster. I think the outcomes are bigger also, which is exciting. And the industry has really changed, both the venture industry and the tech industry. So we are staying on top of things. We're very thesis driven at SineWave. And so our thesis has been pretty consistent where things are going. So I'm happy about that. And we're going to stay focused on, what's new and exciting and coming down the pipe.
Let me start double clicking down on that overview. And first thing to touch base on is, how do you see the changes in the venture capital industry? How is venture changing?
Yeah, so I think you've had, we've always had those big funds. Like, as you know, Ram and I came from NEA before starting SineWave. There's, Andreessen, Greylock, Excel, Sequoia. These funds have, and they admittedly so I hope I'm not putting words in their mouths, I'm taking words from their mouths, have become a little less like venture funds, right? They're more asset managers. Like General Catalyst even filed recently as an asset manager. And so they're taking lots of capital in big chunks, investing it very quickly. So like 10, $15 billion funds that they're investing in a year or two's time in companies at very high prices for probably what I would argue is more mediated returns. They're not looking for the alpha returns anymore. They're looking for, 10% for a pension fund who is looking at an opportunity cost. And then you have funds like ours, which are more focused on a thesis and on the right price and on driving that big return, right, for a company. And so I think you've got this dynamic that wasn't really there before. Kind of where VC is in the ecosystem has changed a little bit. Who the key real venture players are is changing. But you'll always have those guys around the table.
What is your fund size right now?
We manage, our assets under management are about $500 million. Our current fund is 160, and we invest out of that, because we also have an opportunity vehicle, about 250 million out of that fund.
So we've talked about your sized funds. We've talked about the very large funds. How do you view the lower end of the spectrum? The market is full of solo GPs and little funds, 10 million, 25 million, sub 50 million funds. How do you view those and what's changing in their world?
I think, and I'm not sure this is a conscious decision, I think it's a lot of people very excited about venture coming in with their expertise, trying to invest. But from a thoughtful approach, which I think several of them are taking, but from a planning what you're doing here approach, I think that what's happening is, if you look at the market nowadays, it's very hard to do a Series A. The Series A funds, it's kind of a stage that's difficult nowadays, because you've got a lot of high valuations with zero proof points, right? And so seed, which are the smaller funds, is a particularly attractive area, because you're in at a price that's reasonable at an earlier stage, or pre-seed also. And those funds are more of the $50 million, $25 billion solo GPs with an expertise or a connectivity in a particular area. And then you have the bigger funds, or the medium-sized funds like ours, that are going, we still do early stage at SineWave when it matches our thesis, but we may do a little later A or B or C now, right? Because then you could see the momentum coming. And those are the kind of deals that are particularly powerful in a very quick changing environment.
So there is another big development right now, which is entrepreneurs are bootstrapping very effectively. And very early on, with no outside capital, they are starting to be able to show, very serious traction and very fast growth. So now when a deal like that comes into a fundraising situation, the valuations are very, very high.
That's true, but I would argue ridiculously high in some cases. The one rule I would say from venture is when you get ahead of your skis valuation wise, it always comes back to bite you in the bum, right? I've never seen that.
Very true. This is very, very true. And I want to underscore that you should not raise money at the highest valuation that you can raise money at. Because you're pricing yourself out of the exit market, you're pricing yourself out of further fundraising, and if you don't meet milestones that are that aggressive and that far ahead of the curve, you're going to be stuck in this Dunning Neverland.
And it happens even to the greatest companies. We're early stage investors. We're one of the 3 earliest investors in Databricks. And obviously a fantastic high growth company, one of the biggest players in the industry nowadays, but they're not public for a reason. And there are many reasons, but one of the biggest ones is they were always ahead of their valuation. And the public markets don't play that game, and later stage investors don't always play that game. So you've got to be careful.
And there is a term that I don't know, those of you who are listening, Yanev certainly has encountered, called zombiecorn. Unicorns that have become zombies. Basically, they cannot find an exit, they're not growing fast enough, and they cannot raise more money. And this is what happens. Zombiecorn is what happens to you if you raise money at too high a price. So
at the end of the day, it's about building a great business, right? All the well, they raised it this much, so we need to raise it this much. Oh, the price is the most important thing. At the end of the day, build your business and returns will come for you and for the investors.
And a little footnote to that comment is that 96% of the exits in our industry are sub-$100 million exits. So be careful about raising so much money that prices you out of the bulk of the exits. Yanev, switching gears.
Yes.
You've talked a few times about thesis. We've discussed your thesis in the past. Can you summarize your investment thesis for entrepreneurs right now?
Yeah, I'll give you that in 2 parts. Our broad investment thesis, and then particularly, I know, Shramana, you're particularly interested in the AI piece, so I'll talk about that as well. So on the broader investment thesis, my background is I was a senior guy under Bush and Obama's administration, then at NEA, and I'm still one of the only VCs who was senior at a top venture fund and senior in the public sector. And so we invest early stage in companies where the public sector is one of many sales verticals, and we open up that market. So I always say baby Microsoft, not baby Lockheed's, right? Or baby Databricks, not baby Lockheed's, right? Companies that are commercial, where we can help on the commercial business and also open up that billion-dollar public sector business for the same tech. And obviously, AI is a part of our thesis. It's not the only part, and has always been a part of the thesis, even before everybody else was paying attention. And in AI, I'd say there are a few things that people should be building towards, right? You often have a lot of reactivity rather than forward thinking in venture, and you have to always be thinking ahead. So some of those things are access and reliability, right? And consistency in that access, right? How does a business ultimately get their value proposition to make smart decisions from the tech that you're providing, right? I always say, nowadays I say, look, if I want a banana, I don't care if there are 1,000 AI developers in the back room or a monkey. I just want a banana. And if you're not selling the business person that banana at the ripeness level, the color, the size that they want, you're going to have a lot of trouble versus those are those companies building tech for the sake of tech rather than for business use.
Solutions looking for a problem doesn't work.
That's exactly right. I think you have to be secure and scalable, right? You have to be cross-platform. You have to be able to integrate. You have to be multimodal. Another 1 or 2 things that not everybody thinks about is you have to be capable of collaborative sensing. So Can you develop real memory? Can you become adaptive at the end of the day? Every great startup and every great company addresses a current need, but has a vision for the future of what's coming, right? And are able to adapt in that respect. So if I use Databricks as an example, it was real-time analytics based off of Spark, which they built. And look at how they expanded then beyond that to be able to integrate with all kinds of analytical tools. And then we're able to adjust to AI and create a marketplace for that and move into other areas. But the key thing is they were architected for that, right? You have to architect for a future-proof system. So Shramana, to the point you made, things are moving so quickly that you become null and void pretty fast, right? So you have to not only innovate tech for the markets, but you have to innovate, you have to be ahead of tech for tech, right? Tech is changing just as fast as markets and customers are changing, right? And so that's a new phenomenon, I think. And so you've got to be on top of that. And the last piece I'd say is you need to be built for an autonomous computing infrastructure, right? We know how much you have to be able to access different infrastructure, but also be able to think about what is the most efficient use of this. So you hear about superintelligence, and that is a huge opportunity. We have an investment or two in that space. But you also want to sometimes say, what do I need to actually perform this business use case? And sometimes it's not super intelligence. Sometimes it's a very specific function, right? For a specific set of tasks. And so you've got to really be thinking about compute power, efficiency, time, latency in advance, right? Does what you're building match that business ROI?
Yeah. So, Yanev, I want to make a point, and I want your thoughts on it. We hear a lot from people that, oh, this is just a wrapper on top of ChatGPT. Well, there's a lot of domain knowledge that is out there in specific verticals that you can very well solve with a wrapper on top of ChatGPT, because the domain knowledge is where the real work is happening. And okay, yes, you're using the fairly easily available, non-differentiated infrastructure underneath, but it is that layer where all the if you have great founder entrepreneur fits, they're really good domain knowledge, you can solve real problems and charge $250,000, $500,000 for per enterprise customers, or in your one of the things you said, you like governments. We have a company right now that is actually selling to the government, and they are in the process of getting $250,000 beta customer deals. So, but it's a wrapper on top of ChatGPT. So why are we dissing this thing so much?
So I wouldn't diss that necessarily. I think actually technology that understands an industry or a vertical is able to integrate proprietary data is particularly powerful. I would think the industry is kind of headed in a certain way. The way I think about it is, you have AWS and Azure that are kind of the base behind technology, right? NVIDIA, I would argue, on the AI side, right? And they're essentially commoditized. And then they built these marketplaces on top that provide real value, right? On top of their backend. And so you have things like Databricks and Snowflake and others, right? And then on top of that, you're now going to have AI solutions. In AI world, the analogy is NVIDIA to OpenAI, right? To the solutions that startups are providing, OpenAI and similar to solutions that startups are providing on top. So those companies will become the commoditized backend, which is still a massive business. But startups should really be focusing on, Shramana, what you just talked about, which is being able to really provide a solution for a real use case in a particular vertical using that technology where it makes sense. And the last piece I'd say, we do have a company actually in our portfolio called Flurry. And I think the important thing about these wrappers, so to speak, is you need to be able to not only use some of the LLMs and OpenAI and kind of broader information, but you need to be able to connect safely that information safely alongside your own data, right? Mm-hmm. That immediately drives value for that business because you're making decisions off of what's accurate data within your company. Right? And that's where that security, that integration, it becomes so important. So I do think if you're just using AI to answer a company's questions, That's one step, if that's what we mean by wrapper. But on another step, it's actually not only taking those insights, but putting them in the context of an organization's actual info.
Yeah.
And so I think
there's
that's
enterprise
really,
workflow, there's enterprise
really powerful.
vocabulary.
I agree.
Very powerful. Yeah,
I agree.
Very powerful. And you know, these are, as we have seen in the times of where platform as a service as a category was very you know, well regarded in the industry. When Salesforce came with Force.com, companies like Viva got built for very little money. Viva, you know, raised like $4 million. It was one of the most efficiently built companies on top of Force.com. And then it became this multi-billion-dollar public company. I mean, there is great advantage to be able to build on somebody else's stack, especially if you want to build a capital efficient company, bootstrap company, and so on.
That's absolutely correct. You want to be a platform on top of platforms, and that's what we're always looking for, right? Use what's out there effectively and add value to it, right? Add those pieces that really bring value to a business on top of what's out there. By the way, for a VC, that makes for a great exit also. So those are the kind of things we're looking for. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So, Yanev, you said you are investing in superintelligence. Tell me more about what you have invested in and what is your thesis on superintelligence?
So we have one key investment in superintelligence. It's in a superintelligence company, which is founded by the original CTO of OpenAI, the guy who literally started the entire AI revolution. So for us, that's a smart bet on a brilliant technologist who we think is smart about how to architect the future. But what I will say is, like anything, AI is all of these technologies are for a purpose, right? And they're not for everything. So you could use superintelligence for many things, right? And that's doing the management of a broader business. That's really thinking like a human, right? Being able to make decisions, being able to adapt, being able to sense. But you also have instances, like we mentioned, where that may not make sense, right? You don't need superintelligence for specific tasks for certain verticals. You can actually solve the problem more quickly with a small LLM. If you're working on that problem in a vertical way. Because with superintelligence, some of the key things that need to be taken care of are issues of time, the weight of the technology. We mentioned power, we mentioned latency. So figuring out not just how to build something super intelligent, but to actually make it work from a return on investment perspective and from an execution perspective, I think is that extra level that's very important.
So what is your company doing? Is it going for a generic superintelligence, or is it going after certain problems that are very large, big problems, but they are nonetheless vertical problems or specific problems? Like, one of the points that Demis Hassabis makes a lot is, the whole AlphaFold project and his vision of curing all diseases within a decade. Well, that's a great application of superintelligence, and nobody argues with the vision of it. And AlphaFold has a lot of the components to, drive in that direction. That's great.
Yes. Well, I can't tell you too much about what this company's building. It's probably the tightest lipped company I've ever engaged in or encountered in my 20-something years of doing venture. Because it is the founding CTO of OpenAI who figured all of that out. But I think the premise is, the approach that we currently use in AI is not necessarily the best approach, right? And so there are other ways to be able to build in a scalable, ethical, focused, and all of that pre-done for you, not needing to build it into the system or layer it on top of the system. And so that's what they're working on. But I do agree that AI is going to solve some very, very significant problems, already has. And to your point, healthcare, I think, is actually one of the most, is probably the application, apart from some of the search element of things, that has moved the fastest.
Yeah, and it is, it is unambiguously good. There's a lot of ambiguity around the, moral dimension of AI, but on the healthcare side, it's unambiguously all good.
There's always ambiguity, but I do agree it's predominantly very good. I definitely give you that.
Okay, so what are you looking to invest in? Tell us more about what would excite you in terms of types of companies.
Yeah, so I think, we have to fit some of the examples I gave early on about, the scalability, the adaptability, those are really important. But I think things that recognize that the world is variable, right? And, obviously agentic AI is a hot area. That's the reason it's hot is because it helps address that challenge, right? So you can have non-agentic AI for, fixed workflows, but agentic, the kind of promise of that is that it relaxes this constraint. And I actually think the tech is finally catching up to our thesis. It's made it possible to use modular components that you could string together with the right data, the right time for the right person, et cetera, right? But we still need solutions that can assemble, orchestrate, plan, secure, observe performance, and then allow you to make real decisions for your business. If you may know, your listeners, and I know you for sure know that of all these massive AI budgets, only about like 3 to 5% has actually been used by businesses. And the reason for that is because there's still a long way to go for some of this tech to integrate with the real data that matters to that business and be able to start making decisions, right? Learning. You go from information to learning to I would say information to knowledge to like real intelligence, right? And learning and action and adaptation. And I think we've got a ways to go in that cycle.
Yeah.
But it's, as you said, and we started with, it's moving fast, right? So I think we're going to get there.
And my thesis on agentic AI is exactly the same as what we talked about earlier, which is actually solving specific problems with deep domain knowledge. And the places where I'm seeing, production systems that are getting paid big time and are actually succeeding in enterprises are where big problems are being solved. A very nice case study is a company called 1Mby1M that we did some months ago. The health insurance authorization process still works in fax machines. They want faxes. So these guys basically went in the middle of that, digitized that process, but also added agents and automation, kept the human in the loop, but gained tremendously in terms of efficiency and are getting, these are production systems. They're multi, hundreds of thousands of dollars production systems. We have a company in 1Mby1M that has developed a causality AI engine. They're primarily the use cases where they're making big money right now are in like marketing budgets, campaign effectiveness, multi-channel campaign effectiveness. Unilever is a big customer, et cetera, et cetera. So, but these are, again, there's a horizontal platform layer. There's horizontal technology, but really the value is in solving vertical problems, business problems.
And that's the key point, right? You can't just go, Facebook, Google, OpenAI can't hire AI developers. There's not enough of them, right? Thinking that that regular businesses of the Fortune 500 are going to have 1 million AI developers is no chance. And so you can't, and also just generally, you can't go to a customer and say, here's what we can do. You now think about how you'd use this. We're all busy. Everyone, all the people on this call and every human working is busy. We meet tons of people a day. We've got tons of things to do. We're not going to think for you, right? You have to come in and tell me, I have a performance problem or a cost problem. You need to either be telling me instantly how you're going to make me revenue specific to what I think about every day, or how you're going to save me cost, and hopefully both. And then I'm going to pay attention. And your examples sound like they really nailed that for their customers.
And the other thing that I'm seeing, and I really resonate with this angle, is that people are not just selling products. They're selling solutions where they're actually doing a certain amount of professional services to actually implement, because there's a real scarcity of knowledgeable people out there right now. So it's your system, you understand it, your people understand it, well, implement it. Don't get me to find people to implement it. I don't have the capacity to do this.
And it's funny, I always say there's tech, then there's product, then there's solution. And you need to be able to move to the end of that spectrum, right? And that is the arc of a startup, and the arc of a successful startup. And I'd also say to all the folks building things, don't be afraid to bring people who've actually done it. We've had several of these revolutions and several startups you see of folks building things, because they have the technical capacity, but have never worked a day in industry in their life, right? And so bring both pieces of the equation into your business. Talk to customers, ask them what they need, right? Ask for where the problem set is that you can solve. And only solve it if it makes sense for your big vision, right? You don't want a customer to tell you what to be building, but it should inform what you're doing. You'll often hear the same feedback if you listen.
And I think quite a long time ago, this point of view was adapted and validated by Palantir, and they've built an enormously successful company with this point of view, is that they really are doing full solution engineering.
It's funny. So Palantir and maybe Anduril now are the only two counterexamples to what we invest in at SineWave, because we look at commercial first rather than public sector first. But I will tell you with Palantir, who I tremendously respect, that the reason they really opened the floodgates for my business, which is bringing in new technologies to the public sector. And why did they win? Because unlike the big system integrators like the Lockheeds and folks who were providing this kind of information before, those guys would say, tell us what you want. Okay, that's going to cost you $100 million. We're going to give it to you, and you better hope it works. And if you want to fix it or change it, you're going to have to pay us more. Whereas Palantir went in and said, okay, we built this. Oh, it's not working for you. Let's work together to make it work for you, right? It was a collaborative process. We call those design partners, right? Yep. In this case, you want to find a design partner, someone who's willing to spend time on both sides figuring out the answer. And there are some great companies out there that do this. GlaxoSmithKline on the healthcare side is great at doing this. Booz Allen on the kind of commercial, on the public commercial bridge is great at doing this. There are several companies like that are, Home Depot on the consumer side is great at doing this. Really working with a startup, engaging with them early and helping them figure out how to deploy in an enterprise. So I would encourage any of your listeners to try and find those folks who you're not selling, you're working with, because they know the value and you know the value.
Yeah, very good. All right. Yanev, you're staying for a bit with the
Yes, I have a board meeting in a bit, but I'm going to stay as long as I can.
Okay, fantastic.